I'm back. Excuse me. Oh, I grabbed the wrong book. Joy Pigza. Not Ruth Bader Ginsburg right now. Chapter 13. The Moon. I wonder what the moon has to do with any of this. I was just getting a little too nervous at breakfast. I sat down and I stood up, down and up, sat down, and I stood up. Make up your mind, Grandma said. You going to be a jack in the box or a jack out of the box? Can I get back to you on that? I blurted out and laughed and forgot why I was laughing and just felt hollow inside. You're nuts again, Grandma said, and she stood up and went to the bathroom. As soon as she was out of sight, I reached for the telephone. I punched the numbers for home, and it rang and rang, and I started thinking that Mom wasn't at home or at work, and I got it mixed up in my head that she had gone someplace and hadn't told me, like Mexico again, although I knew she hadn't. But maybe she had anyway. She probably went where life was a lot easier, where she'd be happier without me pestering her. Maybe she got tired of worrying about me. I figured if I started walking now, by the time I got home, she wouldn't be there. Not even a note on the table. Nothing. And all her stuff would be packed and gone. I'd open her closets and they'd be empty except for the old things that reminded her of life with me. And she'd have left them behind just like she was leaving me. And everything in her drawers would be gone. All her perfume and jewelry and shoes and magazines. And the only thing left in her room would be the blurry pictures of me in motion because she didn't want to be reminded of her old life now. And that she was busy making a new life. I was desperate to see her and have her hold me, and even though a small part of me said I was thinking out of control, I was too far out of control to listen, and as the telephone rang, I suddenly remembered that Mom didn't have a license anymore and couldn't pick me up if I wanted her to. So I said to myself, just walk home anyway. Just go out the door, follow the road, and it will get you home. And even though I felt my legs were full of springs and ready to walk around the planet, I knew I wouldn't get there fast enough to stop her if she was running away. And then I thought of Dad's car. So I hung up the phone and I went to his room where he was still asleep, and I knew he'd sleep for a while because there were so many empty beer bottles on the floor neatly lined up around his bed like a brown picket fence. I picked up his pants where he had folded them over a chair back and fished the keys out of the pocket and crept up the hall when Grandma called me from the bathroom. Get in here, she said. And I thought she had seen me take the keys, and I was going to tell her I planned to wash the car, but she only said, I need your opinion on something. I stuck my head around the corner and almost screamed, but I caught myself. Grandma had pulled half a cheek full of loose skin all the way back behind her jaw, where she had it gathered in a wad and clipped to her ear with a clothespin. Don't you think I'd look better if I got a facelift? She asked, and breathed through her mouth like a fish out of water. I met someone nice at one of your ball games, and he said I must have looked good 20 years ago. I didn't know what to say, but opened my mouth anyway and said, You better watch out. If you pull the skin too tight, it might rip apart like when you pull Play-Doh too hard. Ah, it's a nasty thought, she snapped, then looked into the mirror again and checked the color of her tongue, which was gray-looking and cracked like a dried-up bar of soap at the gas station. I didn't want to see anything more, and when she asked me to take the little plastic tongue scraper and scrape that gray gunk off her tongue, I just moaned as if I had seen a ghost, and I turned and I ran down the hall. I tugged Pablo out of the hole he had dug in the couch cushion and ran out the front door. I got into the car, and I moved the seat all the way forward like Dad had showed me. Then I took the key and stabbed it over and over at the little keyhole, but they kept sliding away until I got my face really close to the slot and slowly wiggled it in. Then I glanced up at the front door to make sure nobody was looking before I turned the key and slouched down and pressed the gas, and the engine roared. I pulled the gear shift down to R, and the car backed up. I went straight out the driveway. Right away, I knew I was in trouble because I couldn't see where I was going to steer and press the pedals all at once. So I pressed the gas. I lurched back. Then I looked up over the seat, and by then I was already out in the middle of the road and before I could hit the brake, the car flattened the neighbor's mailbox and slid down into a little rain ditch and stopped. I was so scared. I just turned the car off, grabbed the keys with one hand and Pablo with the other, and ran back across the street and into the house, where I pushed Pablo back into his hole and raced up the hall, where I darted into Dad's room and put the keys back in his pants. One good thing about wrecking the car was that it knocked some sense into me, and I no longer thought Mom was trying to leave me behind. And as I sneaked down the hall, Grandma was still looking into the mirror, only now she had both sides of her face pulled back and held in place with circles of Scotch tape. "Give me a hand," she gurgled, and held the roll of tape out. And I did what she said and circled it from around her chin to the back of her head and around like I was wrapping up the Egyptian mummy in a scary movie. Later, after Dad woke up and screamed at the sight of Grandma with her facelift because she scared him half to death and had made a mess in the bathroom, he spotted the car across the street. I thought I was going to be in huge trouble. But he didn't say anything more to me than maybe he forgot to put the car in park and it must have rolled down the driveway overnight, because he had done that before. While he went to call the tow truck to pull it back in our driveway, I turned the television station to one of those exercise shows where people were doing all kinds of hopping around and sweating, and I just did what they did and tried to wear myself out. But Dad saw me doing push-ups, and he turned off the TV. "I want you to sit down and rest," he said, and scooted the coffee table back into its place and smoothed the carpet marks out with the bottom of his shoe. "You got the biggest game of your life tonight, and I don't want you wearing yourself out. Now, what do you want for breakfast?" "Nothing," I said. I'm fine. I'm just fine." And I didn't know what else to do. So I went into my room. I sat down on the corner of my bed with Pablo, and I put the little speakers into my ears and listened to my tape. I pulled out my trumpet and started to play along, which must not have sounded very good because Pablo hopped down and began scratching at the door to get out, but I didn't stop playing. I kept thinking to myself that the music is the glue that keeps me together, so I played as loudly as I could. The next thing I knew, Grandma burst into the room and pulled the trumpet out of my hands. "You gotta knock that racket off," she said in a tight voice that sounded like her jaw was broken because she had it all taped up. "I'm just keeping busy," I said. "Well, try to keep busy doing something more quiet," she suggested. "Yeah," Carter yelled from the kitchen, "like cleaning." I hopped up and went to the bathroom and closed the door before Grandma could get there. I was going to get the cleaning supplies out of the cabinet, but then I saw Dad's foaming shaving cream on the counter, and suddenly thought it was a great time to do something I've been wanting to try. My Tijuana brass tape cover had a woman buried in a mountain of whipped cream, and since I didn't have whipped cream, I thought shaving cream would do. I took off my clothes except for my underwear and began to shake the can and spray foam all over my body. I started with my legs, inched my way up bit by bit, and by the time I sprayed a big swirly beehive of foam on top of my head, I didn't look anything like that tape cover. Instead, I looked like the abominable snowman. I started making moaning noises and was hoping Grandma would come back and knock on the door, because I remembered a scary movie where the abominable snowman met the mummy for a showdown. "Grandma!" I wailed. "Grandma!" "What's going on in there?" she asked and pounded on the door. "Are you sick?" "Grandma!" I wailed. "Open the door!" She pushed the door open and I lunged at her. "Arr!" I growled. Her mouth popped open so wide it snapped that tape around her jaw. She screamed until she lost her breath and had to lean against the wall. I dropped to my knees with laughter, and when she finally recovered, she said, "I don't know what's going to kill me first, heart attack or a lung attack." Then she started to laugh too. It was funny until Dad came around the corner and saw the shaving cream mess all over the bathroom. What has gotten into you? He barked. You're goofing around and making a mess, and all I ask is for you to rest up for our game? Now get in the shower, clean up the floor, and back to your room. You hear me, mister? Yes, Dad, I was only having some fun. This is not a fun day, he snapped back. Today is a serious day. We've got a big game ahead of us, not a shaving contest. Now, do you hear me? Can I get back to you on that? I replied. He jerked forward like he was going to take a swipe at me, but Grandma stepped between us. Calm down, boy. Save it for the game, she said. Dad turned and marched back to the kitchen, where he loudly announced he was going to clean the oven, because somebody made a pot pie mess again. That'll be the third time he's cleaned the oven this month, Grandma whispered to me. I took my shower and went back to my room. I got dressed in my uniform and sat in a chair until I couldn't do that any longer. So I got out my duffel bag and filled it with all my stuff. Then I dumped it out and I packed it again. I got tired of that, so I lifted up my shirt and I got a pen and started to draw tattoos all over my body. I kept doing that until Dad poked his head into my room and told me it was time to eat a little something, then head out to the ball field. When we got into the car, Dad had his speech all prepared. We're going to play like pros with dignity. No tape players, no dogs, no phone calls, no rolling the baseball to the plate. No weird stuff, just pure baseball played by the rules. Do the rules really say no dogs allowed on the mound? I asked. Don't question me, Joey, Dad snapped. I'm a little tense and have no patience for your shenanigans. So just do what I tell you and nothing more. You got that? Dad, I'm not having fun. Get used to it. Life isn't fun when all day long you can't do anything but mess up. I wanted to say something back, but I had such a bad case of jitters that I zipped my lips because I was sure if I spoke, it would be messed up and Dad would be even more tense. By the time we arrived, the parking lot was jam-packed and the stands were full. The towers full of lights were so bright that when I looked up at them, my eyes jerked over to one side, like when you yank your hand back from touching something too hot. I looked over at the green grass that seemed to cool my eyes down, as if dipping my hand in ice water. There he is, Lizzie announced when she saw me coming. The king of the hill. Then she gave me a hug. I've been thinking about you all day. Hope your dad didn't make you wash the walls. When he's nervous, he's a cleaning fool. I smiled. I just cleaned myself, I said. Joey. Oh, Joey, someone called out. I looked up into the stands, and it was Grandma. She held Pablo up. He was wearing his lucky belly sweater. Good luck, she yelled, and then turned away to cough. Come on, Dad said and steered me toward the mound. We've got some business to complete. I followed him out to the mound where he stood and put his hand on my shoulder. Okay, caveman, he whispered. Don't let me down. I hate losing. I just hate it. Guys like us, guys who have had their hard times, well, we want to be winners too. Some lucky people are born winners. But you and I have to go out there and earn it. You know what I mean, son? I do, I said, and I did. I knew everything there was to know about learning how to be a winner, the hard way. I knew it down to my toes, and now I was with my dad, and he was saying things to me about wanting to be a winner that I always felt, but had never said to anyone. And here we were, wanting to be winners together. I had him, and he had me, and we were so alike it was as if I had a giant twin. I didn't want to let him down, and I was hoping and praying I could just get through this one last game before I unraveled at the seams like a baseball that had been smacked around one too many times. Dad fit a new ball into my hand, then he rolled up his sleeve and pointed to his new tattoo. You're undefeated. Let's keep it that way, Joey. This is a championship game. I want you to cover first, cover home, catch pop-ups. I'll try. I'll give it my best. Then I pulled up my shirt and showed him all my tattoos. The ones that I had drawn on with a pen. He looked puzzled. What are they? He asked. Patches, I said, poking them. They'll keep me calm. He frowned. The only thing you need is determination. Now hunker down and let's beat those guys. The umpire stepped forward, brushed off the plate, and the crowd began to cheer. Batter up, he called as he adjusted his chest protector and mask. Dad trotted toward the dugout, and the catcher punched his fist into his glove. Come on, Pigza, blow him away, he hollered. I looked at the catcher's mitt and nowhere else, because I had the feeling if I started looking around, my mind would wander off, so I just threw as hard as I could, and before long, 3 up and 3 down. Our team didn't score either, and I was right back to the mound. I reared back and let one fly, but right away I could tell there was something wrong, because I was trying to throw a strike. The ball went over the umpire's head. The catcher jumped up and threw it back to me. I gripped the ball, and it felt like a jumping bean in my hand. I looked up at the full moon. It was big, round, solid. Come on, Joey, I whispered to myself. Don't crack up. Then I looked back at the catcher. He smacked his glove. Come on, Joey, put it right in here. Come on, Pigza. I did, and the batter hit it in the gap for a double. Oh, right away, Dad was yelling, it's a lucky hit. Come on, Joey, hunker down. Focus, I said to myself as I circled around the mound. Just take it easy and focus. I listened, but the ball didn't. I walked the next 2 batters and loaded the bases. Dad was hollering stuff from the side, but I wouldn't even look at him. On the next pitch, I got lucky and the batter hit a double play that drove in a run, and the following batter hit a fly ball to the outfield. When I returned to the dugout, I pulled my hat down over my face and tried not to hear a thing. Not Dad, or Lizzie, or Grandma, or even Pablo. Inside my head, there was a hissing sound, like someone had poked a hole in me, and whatever control was left inside me was quickly leaking out. You're up, Joey, Dad hollered. As I grabbed my bat, Dad dropped down on one knee, put his hand on my shoulder, and looked me straight in the eye. I want you to stand real close to the plate. That might help with your hitting. And if a ball happens to come at you, just turn your back toward it. Won't that hurt? Well, not for long. You gotta take one for the team, Dad said. Now suck it up and let him plunk you. Batter up, the ump called. I ran over to the plate and got real close and lifted my bat up over my shoulders. The pitcher reared back and let it go, and I thought it was coming for my head, so I dropped down to the ground. Strike 1, the ump hollered. When I stood up, I turned and looked at Dad. He gave me the thumbs up. I inched even closer to the plate and dug my feet into the dirt. The pitcher went into his windup and let the ball fly. I turned my face away, squeezed my eyes together, and the ball slammed right off my helmet. I went tumbling backward and rolled across the ground. The ump dashed over and put his hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? He asked, and he looked scared. I looked up at him. The funny thing was, I think that hit on my head was good for me. It hurt so much I could hardly think of anything else except for Dad, who started to trot toward me. And when I saw him coming, I jumped up and I ran down the first baseline. I'm okay, I kept shouting to the ump. I'm fine. Come on, let's play ball. Yeah, he's okay, I heard Dad say. He's got a head like concrete. The next batter was the right fielder. The pitcher must have been shaken up more than me, because he threw one in there and the batter turned on and blasted it over the fence. I let out a cheer, skipped to second, and turned and ran backward to third, and I was going to walk on my hands all the way to home. But when I rounded third base, Dad slapped me on the butt and growled, "Stop your clowning!" So I settled down and I trotted to the plate. I stood there, and when the right fielder touched home, he said, "Way to take one for the team, Joey, now, or we would just be tied." I smiled like a goon, but when I walked back to the dugout, Lizzie made a big fuss over my head and started to rub it. I pulled away, and when I looked over at Dad, he winked at me and smiled. The side of my head was sore, but it didn't matter because we were ahead, and all I had to do was hold the lead for us to win. Our next batter hit a ground ball out, and I went back to the mound. I took a deep breath, and I looked up into the night. The moon looked like a shiny splat mark in the sky. I reared back, and I threw the ball. It hit the batter on the shoulder before he could duck, and as he trotted toward first, I left the mound and ran over to him. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it," I said. "It's okay," he replied, rubbing his shoulder. "I'm fine." "It was an accident," I said. Then I felt Dad's hand on my shoulder. He steered me back toward the mound. "Don't ever say you're sorry," he insisted. "They did hit you first." "Dad, I think something's wrong with me." "Don't disappoint me, Joey. Don't be a Humpty Dumpty on me and crack up." "I'm not Humpty Dumpty," I said, shuffling my feet. "I'm just me." "Then suck it up. A real champion doesn't make excuses." And he stomped back to the dugout. I threw another pitch, and I hit another batter. "You're losing control," Dad barked. "Come on, get a grip." The coach on the other team started yelling that I was hitting the batters on purpose, and the ump came to the mound. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Did that hit on the noggin knock you silly?" "Oh, it's nothing. Just a little nervous," I said. By then, Dad came running up. "He's fine," he said to the ump. "I'm talking to the boy," the ump said. "You go back to the coach's box." The funny thing is, as I was falling apart, I looked over at Dad walking away with his arms swinging over his head, and I felt as though his problem was my fault. And if I could pull it together and win the game, that he would pull it together too. After the ump settled everyone down, he returned his spot behind the plate and yelled, "Now play ball." I reared back and I let it fly. The ball went on a line directly into the stands. A few people scattered. "Don't make me come out there again," Dad shouted, "or I'll change more than just pitchers. I'll change your whole attitude. Throw strikes." The catcher tossed me another, and I reared back and let it go. It must have popped a car window in the parking lot, because I heard glass flying, and then I saw Dad run toward me, with his face all pinched with anger. I didn't want to see what he would do. I dropped my glove, and I ran toward the outfield. I passed the second baseman, past the right fielder, and climbed the chain-link fence. At the top of the fence, I looked back over my shoulder. All the players were in their positions. They hadn't moved an inch except to turn their heads in my direction. I figured Dad would be right behind me, and he would have been, except that Lizzie was standing in front of him with her hands on his shoulders. "Get back here! Finish this mess you started!" he shouted, and he pointed at me. "Get back here before I track you down!" I couldn't hear what other mean things he was saying, but in my mind, his giant voice was grumbling. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of a little one." I jumped down from the fence, and I rolled and I stumbled through a rough field, and when I reached the road, I ran toward a cluster of lights.